Welcome back to the Lazy Money Machine podcast with Graham Brown and Erik ten Have. Hi, Graham.
Hey, Erik.
Today we're up for another audio clip that I found on the internet this time from a bit of an unexpected candidate for the podcast, I think. Let's listen first.
If you're a businessman, you can make some very humbling mistakes. I've made plenty. I've done a bunch of stuff that's lost me a load of money because it wasn't right, wasn't done in the right way, the right tone. It took something simple and kind of had a blank bit of paper and got carried away with being creative. I'm quite a creative person, and even though I'm surrounded by good people and I'm generally pretty bang on most of the time, everyone can screw up, and I've had my fair share of that. But I think at the same time, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and a boss, I think it's really healthy to have 10% of your budget to screw up. You know, if you haven't got at least 10%, you're not risking enough. If you're comfortable, you're not pushing yourself. My best work has always come from me being uncomfortable. You can take the best people in the world and do a beautiful job and over-deliver and undercharge. And if you haven't got the magic right, it won't work. And it's very humbling and it's good. It means you have to really focus on simplicity. And at the same time, in the last 5 years, I've created 8,000 jobs, opened 40 restaurants, managed to sort of float the ship in a fairly successful direction. But it's been incredibly hard.
Your countryman.
Sounds like Jamie Oliver.
It's Jamie Oliver, yes. And it's funny because he's, especially in the beginning of his career, he was like a tabloid feature piece almost every week, I guess. Yeah. And he also talks in the same interview about how he really didn't like that. But it comes with, failing, I think. And because especially celebrities who fail, that's something that, everybody likes to look out for. So he had these restaurants that were, not working, and yet he closed them down, and there were all sorts of issues happening around him. And in this interview, he talks about how, that's humbling for him, he says, right? It shaped him, and it has given him perspective on what works and what doesn't work. I thought that was interesting, and I think this episode I would like to speak a bit about, what does it mean for us? How do we look at failure?
It's a different type of failure as well. So in some of the episodes we talk about, we mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger as an example and David Bowie.
Right.
They're sort of the kind of failure we're trying to talk about, isn't it? Which is they're hustlers in a way. They went out there and did it, even though they weren't really educated in the traditional sense, right? And that was interesting. And then there's the other type of failure. We had a whole bunch of athletes we talked about on the other podcast people like Mike Tyson, who went and made big mistakes, but ended up bankrupt, right? So it's kind of interesting. There's different types of failures here.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think he's referring to, that's the other part of what he says, which is quite interesting, is that he says, when you start with a blank sheet of paper and you start getting creative, then sometimes you're overdoing it. That's sort of what he's saying, right? He says, and even though I have good people around me, so sort of people that bring him back, like finance people and operations people, he still goes out and tries something that he wants to do, right? He wants to design. And he says, actually 10% of your money or 10% of your budget or 10% of whatever it is that you're doing should be going into screwing up and failing, which I thought was, he's like, okay, it doesn't matter, right? It's part of life.
Right. But he's kind of he's ring-fenced that, hasn't he? He's put that aside and said, right, that's my budget to fail, whereas somebody like Mike Tyson just gambled the whole lot, right, effectively.
Right. So in your life, do you look at failure the same way, Graham?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to do it, and I think people are scared of it. I mean, it's so often talked about because I think the thing is, Erik, it's so talked about in the the subject of starting a business,
right?
That I think maybe we kind of lost the focus of what exactly it is. People think, oh yeah, I'll go out and fail, and it's all part of the process, right? But what actually is that? Is failing, launching a product and it not working? Yeah, well, that's going to happen, right? Or is failing, running out of money and having to close a business down? Yeah, that's going to happen. So that's failure. But is that really the kind of failure that we really need to be talking about? Because that's kind of just part of the evolutionary process of, starting a business and learning, right? I kind of think like the real failure is having to go back to people and say, hey, look, I borrowed $100,000 for you and I can't pay it back. Or, that kind of thing. That's failure. Or, let's say, your family have expectations of what you want to do. They send you to medical school and you turn around and say, right, I don't want to become a doctor. I want to start my own business. So I wonder, from my personal experience, I'm just wondering if that is the real kind of failure. It's easy to talk about the other kind, right? Because it doesn't really hurt. It doesn't really, kick you down. But is it that's the kind of failure that we really need to kind of put a spotlight on? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I've shared it in private with you once, which is when I started my mobile content business in Indonesia, which stopped in 2011. It was a really big success. We were making a lot of money and everything went really, really well. And then it stopped. And then for a couple of years after, I really had to struggle and think about, I had to reinvent myself and my business, which didn't go very smoothly. I had, companies that I started that didn't work. I had investors in the business that I had to disappoint. And then I realized that I think I was cursed because my first big business that I started was a huge success and made me a lot of money. And then I had to realize, look, my statistics are just in reverse. I just need to go through a bunch of failures now to go and find the next thing that will work. Because statistically, it's insane that everything that I put my hands on will work. It's not going to happen that way. So the failures are sort of part of the statistic. And, you just need to go through some struggle and, some soul searching sometimes to go and then find the next thing that you can do. And the other thing I would say about struggle and about failure for me is that I think I've learned to sort of limit the downside. So instead of going all out and gambling everything I have on this one thing that I think might work, I sort of now limit my downside so that if it goes wrong, I still have funds and capital available to go and make another move.
Right. That's the Jamie Oliver 10%, isn't it?
Right.
In a way, you're kind of saying that, okay, I can fail with this, but at each step you're kind of you're creating something which is not going to fail as well.
I think he's very conservative with his 10%, though. I don't believe it's 10%.
Oh, yeah. What did he say? He said something about if you sit down with a blank sheet of paper and draw away or something, that would be that's a bad thing. I didn't quite get that point. Well,
so basically what he says, because he's invented a lot of different restaurant formulas, right? So I think that's part of what it is. So when he comes up with a new project that's like something new and creative, then, you need to give it a go, basically. That's what he said, right?
Right. But is there a danger there, though? That's what he's saying, that because you can do it, you do it, and therefore...
Yeah, but I think you should, and I think that's also what he says. You should fail. The only problem with him is that if he fails, it's over, all the tabloids in the UK and his faces, and then his wife is getting dragged into it and his children, that's really bad, of course. But
it's a bit... Yeah. I would say it's like yourself, but, it's kind of like you talked about having a really successful business and then that leaving you with this sort of legacy where you thought, okay, right, now I've got to go through these failures. But it's kind of interesting, isn't it? You've got these expectations now. And it's a bit like you're talking about with Jamie Oliver. It's like if he fails, the expectations are that he won't fail, right? And like with yourself, if you start a really successful business, now you have those expectations. And it's difficult to repeat, isn't it? That's the challenge with failure, isn't it? Because like you said, it's like now you protect the downside when you go out and do any new project. But, starting out, having a really successful track record and then trying to replicate that's not easy. And in a way, you set yourself up for failure, right? Yeah. Because it's really hard to replicate business models in many cases.
Yeah. There was another couple 10 seconds of the interview, which I wanted to quickly discuss at the end of this, which is also Jamie Oliver. Let's listen to it.
I got kind of pretty bored of the celeb stuff and the structure of it and the papers and the media, and very cynical about it quite early. So about 3-4 years in, I started to realise it was about what I said no to that became more important than what I said yes to.
See, that's also interesting, yeah? So the things you say no to become very important. I also experience that the older I get, the more I think that, okay, what I say no to is important. And it comes down to what we talk about in the book as well, right? For me and for you, I think we prioritize our time, and we're very conscious about where we spend it. We want to spend it on fun projects, we want to spend it on business, we want to spend it on a property portfolio, and we want to spend it on a lot of things that are important in our lives. And for that, for me, it's so important to just say no to things. I think you need to be an open person and be, connecting to many people to find out opportunities. But likewise, I think it's important to really know your values and really know what you want in life and say no to many things as well.
We live in a world where we're expected to say yes to everything, right? That's the challenge. It's like that movie. Have you seen that movie, Yes Man, with Jim Carrey?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Which I think slightly based on Tony Robbins' seminars, right? I mean, obviously it's influenced by it. But it's interesting that that's kind of the default, isn't it? We're expected to embrace every opportunity and every partnership, every business that comes our way, right? But I think you realize that you only grow when you say no to stuff. And that's tough. But that sort of, I guess, bringing it back full circle, that comes with failure, right? You learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was the topic of this episode. Failures, Jamie Oliver, and how sometimes saying no might be more important than saying yes. We'll see you in the next episode.